All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Today, me and Nick here, we're doing our predictions for College Game Day, the projected locations for the 2023 season. A long way to go before we get the season started, but it's always fun to sit down and go through week by week and see where these teams will be heading. We're by no means making projections for these teams on how good they will be, but this is certainly a strong indication of how we do think that a certain team season will play out. Kicking things off, though, Nick, Charlotte for week one, South Carolina and North Carolina. These teams have only played 4 times over the last decade. These games have been pretty good, though. I think back to 2019, Mac Brown, he made his debut with Sam Howell, and he ended up being the starter for the next 3 years. Now he's in the NFL, so that one certainly worked out that day. That was a great game for them, 17-13 in favor of the Gamecocks in 2015, and then most recently in 2021, South Carolina won by 17 points. Beamer Ball, Spencer Rattler, Mike Brown, Drake May, that's really going to be the headline going into this one, Nick, because I don't think either of these teams are going to be exactly spectacular. Of course, when we do our deep dive of research, South Carolina, I think, can certainly be more impressive than the Tar Heels will be. South Carolina, though, this is a team that we picked last year to potentially represent the East in the SEC, and they didn't quite do that, but they're coming off a great stretch at the end of the year. They lost embarrassingly to Florida. I think it was a 20 or 30-point game in that one. And they ended up, beating Tennessee and Clemson, 2 top 10 teams, and they ended up losing to Notre Dame in the bowl game. But that was a very exciting contest that day. There's a lot of momentum in Columbia right now for South Carolina, and I think they're going to ride that all the way into this one, neutral site game against a very good quarterback in Drake May.
I think this has to be the pick here to start off the season for College Game Day, right? This is a rivalry matchup that doesn't play very often. 2 states that bore each other, the flagship institution of two states in the Southeast. I think this is a great matchup. I think Mac Brown, certainly his best coaching days are behind him, but he's got an absolute star in Drake May at quarterback. Drake seems to be committed to being at UNC. Of course, there's a lot of smoke and fire with the committed to the cause in Chapel Hill, which is great. I think I love to see that from a quarterback. And then South Carolina, Shane Beamer is one of my favorite coaches in college football at this point. I think he's really building a culture and a program. I think one of the key things in college football is you got to build the culture first, then you build the program up. I think Shane Beamer has nailed that. The social media team is fantastic down there. I don't know if anyone saw the Office parody they did earlier this week on Twitter. That was quite fantastic. This is a really fun matchup, a rare matchup. They played in Charlotte last time they played in 2021. I like this game a whole lot. I think South Carolina is going to win this one, but this is going to be a fun one to watch.
And now you look at week 2, pretty unanimous decision here. Texas and Alabama, these teams met last year. Alabama went to Austin for an 11 a.m. kick as 3-score favorites. It was, I think, 17 or 21, one of those numbers. They were heavy favorites against the Longhorns, Nick. They struggled for 60 minutes. They won on a field goal at the buzzer. Bryce Young had to pull up some heroics late in that one. That was just an embarrassing game. It really ended up setting the tone for the Tide and what ended up being a unexpected season for them. The Longhorns, though, this is a big game for them, regardless of the final score. I think more importantly, you're going to find out who the quarterback's going to be very early on. Is it going to be Quinn Ewers or is it going to be Arch Manning? Which former number 1 will be the quarterback? That's going to be the heavy topic, though, but I think one that's going to be underrated is who will be the quarterback for Alabama. Jalen Milroe, Ty Simpson, they're in a position of their own when it comes to figuring out who their quarterback is going to be. They've also got plenty of guys to replace on offense and defense, so this is a big game for them. They cannot get caught stumbling here as plenty of skill positions having to get players replaced. But what is the main headline you're going to be focused on? Who's going to replace these outgoing NFL draft caliber players for Alabama, or, of course, the former number 1 prospects battling each other?
Alabama's got to show up week 2 at home and absolutely step on Texas here. I really think they got to blow them out to be considered serious title contenders here. This is a huge game for both programs. Sky high expectations for both programs. Of course, Nick Saban trying to get that 7th title at Alabama, 8th overall. The past 2 or 3 years, I think great for Nick Saban. It's been a pretty down era in Tuscaloosa, and now we have a brand new quarterback battle. The practice footage from Jalen Milroe has been fantastic, but Ty Simpson still is a really solid quarterback, a great pocket passer. And there's a lot of talent to replace on both sides of the ball. Defense, I think I'm not as concerned with as I am with the offense, but I think there's a lot of question marks here for Alabama. Then you look at Texas, in Austin, Steve Sarkisian has not quite gone as well as they had hoped so far since they hired him. Subpar performances from the Longhorns so far. Yes, they hung in with Alabama last year, and they probably should have won that game, but Alabama escapes on a game-winning field goal. Got an incredible positional matchup at quarterback. Quinn Ewers, Arch Manning, 2 of the best quarterbacks to come out of high school in terms of their net grade, and they're battling each other for position, right? Of course, I don't think Steve Sarkisian's going to be shy to pull the trigger on Manning if he needs to. The hype on Manning is absolute sky high. This is also an incredible matchup historically, right? Texas has owned this matchup historically, 7 wins to 2 wins. Of course, the last 2 wins, though, the most important is Alabama won the 2010 national championship game and won in Austin last year. This is going to be a fun matchup. Game Days has to come to this one, I think, in Tuscaloosa. It's going to be kind of wild to see how these two teams play, and it'll be a season-defining game for both teams.
Looking at week 3, there's a handful of options here this week, but we opted to go with the backyard brawl. Pitt in West Virginia. Phil Yurkovich reunites with Frank Cignetti Jr., his former offensive coordinator, had great success with at Boston College, going against the team in West Virginia, who probably should have, let Neil Brown go, but he had a nice little run to end the year. They decided to bring him back. Garrett Green at quarterback. This guy's fun to watch, as is C.J. Donaldson, who was a very impressive freshman a season ago at running back. This is going to be a great game, Nick. They finally brought the series back after a long hiatus last year. They opened the season up on, a Thursday or Friday night. Ended up being a great game for a complete 60 minutes. This is just one of my more underrated and favorite rivalries in college football, and I'm so happy they brought it back. Just these games always seem to be incredibly great. The cold weather, the physicality, the hatred, it's all there. And I think week 3 game day, this would be great for them to go down to Morgantown and check out this great game.
I'd love to see him go to Morgantown for this game. When conference realignment occurred, the major kind of shift in the conferences in 2013, the ultimate downfall of the Big East and all the stuff that came with that 2011, 2013. I think this is one of the forgotten rivalries that was lost in that major conference realignment. I'm so glad they brought it back. The backyard brawl is one of my favorites. I think people forget 2007, Pitt beat West Virginia in the last game of the season to end their hopes of a national championship. West Virginia was going to cruise their way to a BCS national title game, and they lost at home to Pitt to cost themselves a national championship. Pat McAfee, of course, talks about that all the time on his podcast. So I think it's a very exciting matchup. I think Game Day, they went to this game last year. It was on a Thursday opening week. I think they got a chance to go to this one again here in week 3. This is an exciting matchup. Morgantown, the team has not been great, right? The last 10 years have been very forgettable in Morgantown. Neil Brown probably should have lost his job, but I think they're going to be up for this game, bringing the rivalry back for the first time since 2011 in Morgantown, in a game that they won, by a single point towards the end of the game. So I think they're going to be fired up. That crowd's going to be crazy loud. They're going to be really pushing for that. If they don't win a lot of games this year, they're going to want to win this one for sure.
Yeah, that's certainly going to boost some morale also in keeping Brown's job potentially. Looking at Florida State and Clemson, again, it's going to have some significant implications in the ACC. So glad this game's happening early on in the year. Jordan Travis is coming back. Jared Verse, he could have been a first-round pick. He's coming back. There's a lot of hype, Nick, for Florida State. And that was before they had this phenomenal transfer portal class. They added a lot of big-time players. We made a video on that a little bit ago. This Florida State team has a lot of hype, Nick. Mike Norvell, people are finally being a little bit patient with him because they understand what's going on. Early on, though, in his tenure, things weren't great. It didn't seem like Florida State would ever get back to the Jimbo Fisher days. But I think right now, they're there, and the potential is going to be, up in the air if they can beat Clemson. Cade Klubnik, he's got a bright future. He's going to be a young guy. This is going to be a tough game for him, but he will be playing at home. A lot of questions about the Tigers' defense. They certainly weren't great last year at times. I think they allowed over 20 points per game. They certainly missed Brent Venables. Now they're going to lose some very impactful playmakers, especially on their defensive line. Still talented nonetheless, but they're losing a lot of talent on this defense, Nick. And Florida State, their offense, they had some success last year against Clemson at home. So this is going to be a very interesting game. This is going to have a lot of playoff hopes for both teams. I think the winner of this game is more than likely going to cruise to a potential playoff nomination. If not, they'll be playing for the opportunity to do so.
I agree. I think this is going to be a tone-setting game for the ACC. The winner of this one has the easiest path to the ACC title game and the college football playoff. Death Valley's going to be rocking on this game. Clemson's won the last 7 against Florida State here. Although the last 2 years in Clemson and in Tallahassee, Florida State's played them close. A 10-point game 2 years ago, a 6-point game last year. So certainly the Seminoles are knocking on the door. They've put together something here. Mike Norvell is building a culture. Like I said, with Shane Beamer, you got to build the culture first, then you start to build the program. I think Mike Norvell has kind of got that under wraps finally in Tallahassee. We see it with Jared Verse coming back. Jared Verse is not going to come back for no reason, right? He clearly buys into the program. He's going to skip out on a chance to go to be a first-round pick in the NFL draft, one of the best players when he came out of the portal from Albany a year ago, and now he's got the chance here to play another year in college football. This defense of Florida State's continuing to be great every single year. They're producing a lot of talent, top to bottom, a very strong defense. I expect a good defense this year, especially with the portal additions. This is a very tone-setting matchup for the ACC. Clemson, a lot of question marks about Dabo Swinney, right? Lost both his coordinators a year ago. They didn't make the playoff last year. Are they going to be able to get back to the playoff? They want to win a national championship in Death Valley. They haven't really sniffed one since 2019 one. They got to find a way to put this together here. Is Klubnik the guy to lead them? I think he is. He's got the talent to certainly do so. This is a huge matchup with huge playoff implications.
Like you look at Florida State, guys like Jaheim Bell, Fentrell Cypress, Jeremiah Byers, they picked up some elite players in the portal. This is a big game for Dabo to kind of silence some doubters. They lost to South Carolina finally. last year. They didn't look very good against Tennessee. I mean, the offense cracked the 50-yard line like 12 times. I don't think they scored a single time. That's just how strange of an effort it was in the Orange Bowl. And Dabo's not a fan of NIL. He's not attacked the portal one bit. So he needs to start to, answer some of the critics here. And I think this is a big game to do it. If they lose this one, though, a lot of questions are going to be on his desk come Sunday afternoon for Dabo Swinney. Next up, you have Auburn hosting Georgia. Auburn, how good will they be? They're likely going to be 3-1 or 4-0. They do play Texas A&M. That game will be the one I think that they potentially lose. Regardless, I'm not sure if Auburn will be ranked or not, but for purposes of this game, the AP might just do that. Big time opportunity for Hugh Freeze to make an early statement here. Jordan-Hare Stadium's always rocking, one of the loudest in the country. This is just a typical SEC brawl, Nick. Sometimes Auburn competes with Georgia, sometimes they don't. This is always a game that really is a great measuring stick, I think, for the Bulldogs, because we've seen them have some troubles with them in the past. In Georgia, this is not a schedule that's very testy one bit. Outside of this game, they don't see Ole Miss and Tennessee till November, so they're going to likely be undefeated for many weeks to come if they lose this game by chance. How do you see this one kind of playing out? Of course, we're months away from this game actually happening, so a full breakdown, of course, I don't want you to offer that, but do you think this game will be close in any sense? Because I do think that some of those factors are there, but this is also a Georgia team that's going to be incredibly good, and I just think that the path for the playoffs is very simple for them also.
You never know what you're going to get in the Deep South's oldest rivalry. In Jordan-Hare, that place, there's a lot of magical energy there. Certainly exciting matchup. Georgia's dominated this rivalry since 2011, right? They've only lost twice, both times at Jordan-Hare. Of course, they lost on the prayer at Jordan-Hare, and they got blown out in 2017. But Georgia would get their revenge, beating Auburn, really putting them to bed in the SEC title game later that season. Georgia, right? Not a tough schedule at all. One of the easiest we've seen for any of the contenders here. They're kind of going to cakewalk their way to the SEC title game. This is their real own trip up early on in the season, right? We saw Auburn yesterday play in their spring game, right? We saw the first kind of look at Hugh Freeze in a spring game. There's going to be a lot of energy with Hugh Freeze. They love that higher down the plains. I'm not entirely sold on it. I think it's going to take me some time to get used to it. But if this team comes in unbeaten, ranked, that place is going to be rocking like it hasn't in a very long time. So there's a real opportunity here. Georgia can get caught off guard. They've dominated the last two games against Auburn, right? They put up 70+ points, only gave up 20 over the past two seasons. So I certainly think Georgia should be the favorites in this game, probably close to double digits, but you really never know what you're going to get at Jordan-Hare. So this could be a wild one to watch. I think if Auburn's unbeaten, there's got to be GameDay's got to go, and I think it could be a really interesting matchup early on in the season at Week 5.
Another interesting matchup, Texas A&M and Alabama. Jimbo Fisher and the Aggies, they were flat out awful last year. Picked the team to win about 10 games, and they came nowhere near that one bit. They were just flat out awful, Nick. But guess what? They still came, a yard or two away from beating Alabama. Granted, Jalen Milroe, I think that was his first career start. He really kept them in that game with some of the turnovers and mistakes he had. But nonetheless, this was an excusable performance from Alabama. Another one of those games where week to week they just seem to be on the ropes. And that comes, off the heels of them actually losing to Texas A&M the last time they came to this stadium, unranked, beat number 1 Alabama. And I think, why not go game day there again? I have no idea what the Aggies record will be. I haven't even looked at them yet. They're too much of a headache, I think, at this moment in time to think about. So I'll give it a few more weeks before I dive into Texas A&M. But I think the writing is certainly going to be on the wall, especially when, like again last year, the Aggies were not good at all, and they still challenged Alabama. I think the game day crew, they'd love to go to Aggie Land because College Station is a phenomenal college atmosphere in Alabama. They seem to really struggle here. That's been kind of a theme since the Aggies joined the conference all the way back in 2012.
I agree. This is an interesting rivalry that's kind of brewing here since they joined the conference in 2012, right? A&M joins conference. Johnny Manziel leads his team in Tuscaloosa, picks up a rare win in Tuscaloosa, and Nick Saban doesn't lose a whole lot in Bryant-Denny. Then Alabama goes and wins 9 in a row, including a 59-0 thumping on their return trip to Texas A&M. But a couple close games at College Station sprinkled in there. 2019, people forget that was a close game early on. I know it was, ended up being a 20-point win towards the end, but that was a close game early on. And of course, they lose in their last trip to College Station. A&M played them close last year at Bryant-Denny. Of course, I think it's more about Alabama than it is about A&M. This is certainly an interesting matchup here. Alabama hopefully at this point will be kind of hitting their stride, unbeaten, 5-0, trying to find that groove and get comfortable with their quarterback play. I think this is a big road test. That stadium, Kyle Field, is always loud, one of the toughest environments to play in college football. Stadium's going to be shaken. They're going to be up for it for sure. They're going to think they can win this game. There's still a ton of talent on A&M's roster despite all the transfers and everything that kind of went on in the offseason and despite the poor record. And Jimbo Fisher, that seat's getting hot, right? It's going to keep warming up. If he can put it together a win here, it's going to cool that seat off for sure. But they don't like him a whole lot after this last season. And if he starts to lose a couple games here and there, that seat's going to start getting boiling hot. And it's going to be a lot of trouble for Aggie fans.
Looking at week 7, USC travels to South Bend against Notre Dame. Caleb Williams coming back. He's going to be the favorite to repeat here as the Heisman. Lincoln Riley, of course, did some nice work once again in the portal to add some significant playmakers on defense. Also picked up a nice receiver in Dorian Singer. This is a team that should be undefeated coming into this game. They should certainly be top 5, I would say. The back half of the schedule for USC is not that favorable, though it's very tough. They would certainly earn their playoff route if they were able to come away with a lot of wins in that part of the season. But it's going to start here in South Bend. Marcus Freeman. This is a guy who really struggled early on in the year. They just could not beat anybody. Struggled against Cal, they lost to Marshall. That is at home. It was just a flat-out disaster, but they did compete with Ohio State in week 1 in Columbus, and they're also going to face them early on this year. So we'll see how good Notre Dame will be. This is a team that really got things going in the back half of the season, though, for the Irish. This is a team that has a nice quarterback battle in Tyler Buckner, as Drew Pine departs. Sam Hartman comes over, though, so I certainly think it's a big boost for a team that did not have a great downfield passing attack last year. Joe Alt, one of the top tackles in college football. This is an offense that's certainly going to click. And I think, guys like Benjamin Morrison are certainly going to help out the defense. I think Notre Dame's going to be a lot better than people probably expect. And I think for them, this is also where their season's going to start to come full circle for them. And we're going to see how good they are. So I think this is going to be a no-brainer for game day. Not sure what Notre Dame's record will be. USC, Nick, they should be undefeated coming into this one, and it would certainly earn them game day honors.
USC certainly should be undefeated when they get to South Bend. This is a rivalry that's kind of finally coming back to full strength after the last about 10 years or so being a weaker rivalry with both teams kind of struggling to find their groove. Notre Dame wasn't terrible, but Southern California had been bad for about 10 years, and before that, Notre Dame had been terrible while USC went through their great domination period with Pete Carroll. So finally, both teams are kind of getting even again in this rivalry. These teams hate each other. It's a very exciting rivalry, very historic rivalry, one of the more interesting ones in college football, simply because there really is no geographical tie between these two programs, and it really just comes out of the historical aspect of it all. I'm glad they keep this rivalry going. This is a fun one to watch. I think USC under Lincoln Riley, they continue to put together a great roster. Caleb Williams, a star quarterback, obviously Heisman winner. They improved the defense, which is really the key here. We ragged on USC's defense all year last year. We had a lot to say about them, and they certainly disappointed us week in, week out. They've upgraded the defense a whole lot. Meanwhile, Marcus Freeman, who I thought was a home run hire, didn't quite have the greatest first season. Kind of came around towards the end, won a bowl game, beat a good South Carolina team. They got a nice quarterback battle there. They're putting together a solid roster. They lost their offensive coordinator, Tommy Rees, so that's certainly something to watch. I'm excited to see how both these teams play out. I think USC should be banging on the door of the playoffs very easily. And Notre Dame, they're a total wild card. You never know what you're going to get out of them. They could really put something together this year if they start to win some games.
Now moving to week 8, I was flat out wrong about Penn State last year. I thought this team would go 6-6. I thought James Franklin would set things up for a big 2023. That opinion certainly has not changed, especially after a Rose Bowl victory. So I certainly think, for me, things have certainly come full circle because I did anticipate them being a team I'd be high on coming into this year. And I would say this is a team that's going to be really good, Nick. Former 5-star Drew Aller is going to take over at quarterback. You've got a great backfield, 2 young guys and sophomores, Katron Allen, Nicholas Singleton. Picked up a nice speedy receiver in Dante Cephas. I really like this offense. They also got a top 10 prospect coming back at tackle in Fashahanu. I really like what they have on defense. Guys like Kalen King, Curtis Jacobs, Chop Robinson. This is a team I'm going to be very high on coming into the year, Nick. But to win the conference and make the playoff, they have to get over this hurdle in Ohio State. And, of course, I feel like their fans are still, not just the fans, but I think everyone as a whole when it comes to college football are kind of still leaning on that upset win they had numerous years ago in Happy Valley that sprung them to a conference championship victory. That was long ago, Nick. How can they, bounce back and do that again? Because this is a hurdle that you have to get over that not a lot of teams that, certainly compete in this conference can do. The Nittany Lions are one of them.
Certainly, Penn State's got to put up or shut up at this point, right? They've lost 6 in a row to Ohio State, including, they beat Ohio State in Happy Valley 2016 to win the conference title with Saquon Barkley. Then they traveled to Columbus, lost by 1 point in 2017, and then they absolutely blew it in 2018 at home, losing by 1 point, 4th and 5 draw play. Chase Young blew it up, one of the worst play calls I've seen in a clutch moment there. And since then, the games have not been super close, double-digit victories in the last 4 games for Ohio State here. I equally thought Penn State was not going to be great last year. I really did not trust what James Franklin was doing. I really figured they'd be in for a tough year. They proved us wrong, went to the Rose Bowl, won the Rose Bowl, and are putting together something in Happy Valley. That is a tough place to play when they're rocking. I know this game's going to be in Columbus, but this is a good team. They have a good offense, great running backs, good quarterback play of a 5-star, good offensive line. The defense is not too bad either. They continue to produce a lot of talent out on the defense that goes to the NFL draft. Then meanwhile, on the flip side, Ohio State, going to have a new quarterback under gun. By then, at this point in the season, at week 8, you'd like to think that Kyle McCord will be
really comfortable at quarterback, a lot of talent still.
Wide receiver, nice defense overall too. But Ryan Day's seat's getting hot in Columbus, whether you want to believe that or not. I definitely think it is. So he's going to start to put together some wins here. If he loses this game at home to Penn State, people are going to be calling for his head in Columbus. Absolutely.
Speaking of Ryan Day's job getting hot, we're just going to assume they win that game for the intrigue that is with Week 9. And the reason I say that is Wisconsin, I think, is going to be an incredibly dangerous football team under Luke Fickell, who wants to be the head coach at Ohio State more than anything. That's why he took this position, Nick. When he could have stayed with Cincinnati as they went to the Big 12, and he could have competed for, playoff nominations on a yearly basis. But he makes this jump. He's bringing Phil Longo with him. They're going to completely transition this offense. Tanner Mordecai as well coming over from SMU. This defense is certainly going to still be elite, I would say, because that's just Cincinnati. They've been one of the top defenses ever since he took over. I think this is a massive game for Wisconsin. Luke Fickell wants, again, that job so badly, and I think this game's going to mean so much to him. He wants to win this game more than anything to try and prove a point. They're going to sell out all they can to win this game. It's going to be a tough one for Ohio State. It's the same old when they played the Badgers, though. Wisconsin has a great running game. Defense, they hold up just enough until the offense for Ohio State starts clicking. It's the same old every year, right, Nick? So it's going to be different now. Luke Fickell's in town. The offense is different. Traveling to Madison is not easy to begin with, but now there's some intrigue behind it. This is going to be one of my favorite games I have circled since Luke Fickell took over this job. Can't wait for this one here in Week 9.
Very exciting. We talked about Wisconsin in depth earlier in the winter. We talked about how Luke Fickell, we both think Luke Fickell was a home run hire for Wisconsin, and this is really going to put together and change this program's trajectory. They're not a bad team, certainly in the Big Ten in the past years, but they just archaic offense, great defense, can't really put it together when it matters the most. They've played Ohio State. They've lost 9 in a row to Ohio State, including 3 Big Ten championship games, including that brutal 59-0 beatdown in 2014. This is Ohio State's first trip to Madison since 2016. It's been a while since they've been to Madison.
We can be rocking when this team is
good. They should be unbeaten by this point in the season, right? This should be a matchup of unbeaten teams as long as Ohio State does their job against Penn State the week before. It's going to be loud in there. They're going to be bouncing around, jumping around all day. This is a really fun matchup, a tone-setting matchup for the Wisconsin program. And again, Ryan Day is going to be in a lot of trouble if he loses this one or the Penn State one. I think Ohio State's got a tough schedule this year. There's a lot of trip-up opportunities here. This is a big put-up-or-shut-up year for Ohio State as well.
Looking at LSU, I was not shocked to see them represent the West last season, and I think that they're going to be competing yet again with Alabama to win the conference. Week 10, I think, the Tigers coming to Tuscaloosa. Every year when you do these predictions, you always assume that this game will be the one that game day goes to, and I think that this year is going to probably be no different. We just talked about the Tide a couple minutes ago and the battle they have at quarterback. Some of the skill positions are up for grabs. I think regardless, Alabama's still going to be a top 5, top 10 team, even if they slip up maybe against Texas or A&M, whatever the case may be. This is still a team that's going to have national recognition, that's going to be playing for something late in the year. And I think LSU, Garrett Nussmeier, Jaden Daniels, what they were able to do against Georgia defense, it was, a little bit expected, not so much 500 passing yards. This is a team that can certainly play some offense. Mike Denbrock, I think he really likes what he has, getting a lot of talent at pass catcher back. You got a guy like Harold Perkins on defense, still a very talented unit for the Tigers. I'm not really sure how good LSU is going to be, but I think Brian Kelly's going to have this team pumped up, and the winner of this game will likely be headed to Atlanta once again.
Absolutely. This game always seems to decide who is going to be the West representative in Atlanta. Last year was no different. Of course, Alabama's dominated this rivalry the last 10 years, right? They've won 10 of the last 12, including the 2011 national championship game. But LSU's won the games when it matters most. They came in 2019 and beat Alabama at home to begin what was really their climb to the national championship, and they won last year at home, knocking off Alabama, a game that I was at, to punch their ticket to the SEC title game in Brian Kelly's first year. A huge boost for Brian
when he was hired.
But if you start winning, culture doesn't really, that can be thrown out the window, that argument. He started winning early on, went and won his first division title in his first season. I think this game certainly, being at home is big for Alabama, but of course people forget in 2021, LSU could have won that game. They had a last-minute play. They were in the red zone with about 10 seconds left and threw a Hail Mary touchdown attempt, and it was batted down in the end zone. So certainly was a chance there to win that game. Alabama escaped that one. Trend in the last couple seasons with Alabama escaping games like they really shouldn't be late involved with here. I think both these teams could be solid by this point. Alabama should be unbeaten. LSU, they might have one loss, But game day should come Tuscaloosa. This should be a nice game under the lights here at Bryant-Denny. I'm excited for this one. A very important matchup again, as one of these teams will most likely be going to the SEC title game.
Week 11, Big Ten getting 3 out of the last 4 nods. Penn State, we just talked about them and why I think they'll be a good team. Even if they lose Week 8, I still think they're going to be one of the higher-ranked teams in the conference, going against Michigan, who's going to be battling with the Buckeyes also for that division. Blake Corum's coming back. Him and Donovan Edwards, top running back duo in college football, I would say. Nice young quarterback in J.J. McCarthy, was looking for some payback after a terrible end of the year. He did not play very good in that playoff game. They went to the playoffs twice in a row, Nick, winning the conference. They're looking for more, though. Michigan, this is going to be a big-time opportunity for them. They've certainly had the Nittany Lions number the last couple of years, all of a sudden, like what Harbaugh's doing down there. But this is, once again, going to be a very tough game for them late in the year. Certainly anticipate Michigan continuing to compete for the division crown. So we'll see what happens in this one. What are your expectations for, Week 11 and these two teams? They should both be ranked playing for something, I'd imagine.
Right. If Penn State certainly can be undefeated, this will have a lot of juice for this game. Michigan, of course, last 2 seasons have won the Big Ten, beat Ohio State 2 years in a row. Certainly a wild thing to see for this Michigan Wolverines program. Jim Harbaugh has steadied the ship after some people were suggesting he might jump ship and leave, and his seat was
Silence those doubters, won 2 conference
titles in a row, 2 trips to playoffs, but he's not got over that hurdle of winning a game in the playoff. Michigan certainly wants more. They want to go compete for a national championship. They want to be playing in the national championship game. This is a big matchup. I expect this to be the whiteout game in Happy Valley. I've looked at the schedule. I think this has got to be the game they circle to be the whiteout game here. I think this will be a perfect candidate for it. And if you add that atmosphere to already a very tough matchup, I think it's going to be very tough for Michigan if the whiteout game is truly in effect. We've seen in the past, of course, that clip circulates on social media all the time of the year that Michigan played Penn State in the whiteout game. And on the first play of the game, they had to call a timeout because they would have got a false start because that's how loud it was in the stadium, or a delay of game because how loud it was in the stadium. So certainly a rocking atmosphere in Happy Valley every single time. Tough place to play. Penn State's going to be as good as we think they're going to be. It's going to be even tougher for Michigan. This is a very big matchup for these two programs.
Looking at Week 12, Georgia and Tennessee. Now, much like the Week 9 game with Wisconsin Ohio State, this is one I'm circling because Joe Milton, he has waited a long time for an opportunity like this. This is his 5th or 6th year in college football. He sat around and waited behind Hendon Hooker last year as a great teammate, got an opportunity in the Orange Bowl, and he shined. And this is going to be a big moment for him. I don't anticipate Tennessee being as good as they were this past season, but they're still going to be a ranked team nonetheless, especially late in the year, hosting the #1 team in Georgia. I anticipate they'll be their top-ranked team who's undefeated. This is going to be a massive game here in Neyland, late in November, Nick. I mean, there's not much you can say because Tennessee, even though they might not be playing for the East, this is a game they certainly are still going to want to win. I think they're going to give Georgia plenty of headaches here. This game just all around kind of like the Week 9 one. It means too much just to ignore. And I think that's why this is going to be such a massive game, regardless of, Tennessee potentially having 2 or 3 losses. And if by chance they're undefeated themselves battling for the East, well, that makes it even better.
I agree. This is a fun matchup. Georgia's won the last 6 in a row. Actually, the last time Tennessee won was the Hail Mary between the Hedges, one of the famous wins in this rivalry, a very underrated rivalry in college football because Tennessee has been kind of, very mediocre for the past 15 years or so. Big opportunity for Tennessee. I think Joe Milton's a good quarterback. I'm excited to see how he plays for Tennessee. Last year was what seemed like their once-in-a-generation type of team. Fell at the hurdle and lost 2 games late in the season, including one to Georgia. I still think Georgia wins this one easily, but I think this could be a fun matchup if Tennessee is having a strong season. Of course, they got to play Bama before this. They got to play a couple other good teams before this. So certainly they could find themselves in a bit of a tricky situation. But I think Georgia, this is another one of their few tough matchups, another trip on the road, right? They travel to Auburn, they travel to Knoxville. So those are 2 tough matchups here for this Georgia team. If they slip up, they're going to be out of the playoff race. So this could be an interesting matchup overall because Georgia has a lot to lose. Tennessee has nothing to gain, but they could certainly do a whole lot with this.
Now, looking at the final week of the regular season, rivalry weekend, really, we're not going to make too much of a fuss over this because they can go anywhere. Ohio State, Michigan, we're going to go ahead and pick that. Once again, we think that will probably be the game that determines the conference. But there's the same few teams you can go to every year, the same few schools, Nick. Alabama, Auburn being one of them. You know the schedule. If you watch college football, you know exactly where the potential locations are. Not much to it here. Week 13, don't really talk about this matchup, but more so just talk about rivalry week and, what are your expectations, even though we're, like 8 months away or whatever the number is.
Yeah, there's exciting rivalries coming up. Obviously, of course, you got your traditional rivalries, and there's some underrated matchups. I'm looking forward to Mizzou, Arkansas. I think it's a very underrated rivalry that's starting to brew in the SEC. I like to see what I can see out of those 2 programs. I think Eli Drinkwitz's got to start putting something together here, or else he's going to find himself in a lot of trouble. Of course, Ohio State, Michigan. This
rivalry because normally these two teams are unbeaten, but
as we said, we've talked about, 3 Big Ten games in the last couple of weeks. So there's certainly opportunity for Ohio State and Michigan both to lose games and find themselves in a tricky situation here. Auburn, Alabama in Jordan-Hare. You really never know what you're going to get out of Auburn in that rivalry at home. They took Alabama to 4 OTs last time they played in Auburn, and then they beat them in 2019 in the Mac Jones game as he come in for relief for Tua and is injured. So there certainly is some magic against Alabama and Auburn, so you never know what you're going to get there. I think there's some other interesting matchups on the weekend. Some of the games in the American Conference are kind of bouncing around, that there could be some interesting matchups in the group of 5 that have playoff or have big bowl game implications. A lot of really interesting matchups here. I think this is going to be probably the pick for game day, but it's really going to come down to which team has the best potential to impact the playoff, and this could be the one, but also
across the conference.
That's me for today's episode, guys. As always, Nick, I appreciate you joining me. Nice little pump-up episode here at the beginning of spring.
Yeah, I'm excited for game day. Of course, game day is kind of entering that transition period where they're bringing on new personalities. Pat McAfee's being a big impact as Lee Corso's getting closer to retirement, and they're kind of shifting sort of the way they're kind of doing the show to attack a new, younger demographic in the social media age. I like the direction game day is going here. I think it's a very exciting program. Still, I think it's a very important program to college football. One of my favorite things to watch if I can get myself early enough to watch it on a Saturday. Very excited to see where they go this season. I'm very excited to see what type of games they attack and what type of direction they go.
Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.